put us all on mute, and we are going to have a fantastic time. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual interactive panel discussion brought to you by the ACHE of Northern New England. My name is Tia, and I will be serving as your ACHE technical host for today. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items to help you navigate our virtual environment. For the purposes of noise control, your lines will be muted for the duration of the session. The chat function will be available to you throughout the entire event, and we absolutely encourage you to use it to keep this session as interactive as possible. Open up that chat box, introduce yourself, say hello, let us know where you're calling in from. We really want to hear from you. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing in ACHE's Learning Management System in approximately 2 business days. Today's session is worth 1.5 hours of ACHE Virtual Interactive Education credit. To earn this credit, you must be logged in for the entire 90 minutes of this event. All attendees who meet this requirement will have their 1.5 Virtual Interactive Education credit applied within 2 weeks from today's event. We do encourage you to complete the evaluation. I will share the link in the chat box shortly, and then I will reshare it before we close out. Now, to begin, let me turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Tia. Welcome. On behalf of the American College of Healthcare Executives of Northern New England, I would like to welcome you to our December panel, Developing Mentoring and Coaching Skills. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Bonica, and I am the Education Chair for the chapter. If you are a chapter member and would like to help with planning events like these, please send me an email. I've posted my email address in the chat. It's way up at the top. All these lovely hellos are coming in. The link to the slides for today's presentation are also in the chat way back up at the top. Now, without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce our moderator today, Major General Retired David Rubenstein, FACHE. General Rubenstein served 35 years in the U.S. Army Medical Department, culminating with serving as the Army's Deputy Surgeon General and 16th Chief of the Medical Service Corps. He spent 12 of his 35 years in command. General Rubenstein has been inducted as an outstanding alumnus at 2 universities and has received the Outstanding Federal Healthcare Executive Award from AMSIS, the Society for Federal Health Professionals. General Rubenstein's professional credentials include being a board-certified healthcare executive who is a past chairman of the Board of Governors of the American College of Healthcare Executives. He has received ACHE's Gold Medal, its highest award for service to the profession. He served for 8 years as the public member on the Surgery Committee of the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, ACGME, and has served on the Texas A&M College of Medicine's Military Medicine Advisory Council. Following 5 years as chairman of the board of directors of AMSIS, the Society for Federal Health Professionals, he was formally honored as its only chairman emeritus. In addition to authoring peer-reviewed professional articles, David offers presentations to civilian and military audiences on leadership and professional development topics. General Rubenstein, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everyone who has signed in and is participating, not just listening, but participating in today's panel discussion on mentoring and coaching skills. I want to start first by thanking Mark, Monica, and Jill Bowen. Mark as the education chairman for Northern New England, and Jill Bowen as the membership chairman for Northern New England. They've been working tirelessly behind the scenes to set this up. We will have time for questions and answers during the course of our visit together for the next hour and a half. I'd also like to thank Latia Taylor, Tia, for being our virtual host up in Chicago, where she's probably chillier than most of us are. The topic today on mentoring and coaching will include some polling questions for you. And I'd like to do a warm-up poll just so you find the buttons and we can make all of that work. So let me ask Tia to throw up the first poll and ask you all to respond to that, please.
We have our votes coming in. We'll give you all about a good 30 seconds. Take about 10 more seconds. Thank you for everyone who's participating and answering our question. How many mentors have meaningfully shaped your career? And we will close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Great. Thank you very much. That's how the process will work. We'll have 4 polling opportunities during the course of our time together. What I'd like to do is introduce our panelists. And we will hear from each of them in turn after I've introduced them, and then we'll go into some Q&A. We have some questions. I've got some questions that I would like to ask them, and then I would ask you all to be prepared to ask questions. You're on mute, and so whether you write a question in the chat box or indicate by a raised hand, let's hear your questions as well because they're very, very important. The first of our 3 panelists is Dr. Stephen Leffler, MD. Steve is the president and COO of the University of Vermont Medical Center. He began his career at University of Vermont Medical Center in 1993, 32 years ago, as an emergency room physician. He served in the past as Chief Population Health and Quality Officer for the UVM Health Network, Chief Medical Officer at UVM Medical Center, and the Medical Director of the Emergency Department. He has also served as a professor of emergency medicine at UVM, the College of Medicine, president of the medical staff of UVM, president of the Vermont Medical Society, and chair of the OneCare ACO board. Our second panelist is Tom Manion. Tom is the president and CEO of New London Hospital, which is a member of the Dartmouth Health System. Tom serves on several nonprofit and association boards in New Hampshire, as well as being a state-appointed member of the Legislative Commission on the Interdisciplinary Primary Care Workforce. Prior to joining New London Hospital in 2020, Tom served as vice president of the Porter Medical Group at the Porter Medical Center in Middlebury, Vermont. He holds a Master's of Public Administration in Health Services Financial Management from New York University. He is a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives and a fellow of the American College of Medical Practice Executives. And then our third panelist is Marie Vienneau, currently the Senior Vice President and President of Northern Light Mercy Hospital in Portland, Maine. A registered nurse by training, Marie has served in progressive administrative roles in rural hospitals for 34 years, 20 of them as a rural hospital and critical access hospital CEO and president. She is a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives, past ACHE Regent for Maine, past chair of the Maine Hospital Association, Maine Hospital Solutions Board of Directors, and past president of the Northern New England Association of Healthcare Executives. What I'd like to do is put up our slide deck. There we go. There we go. Put up our slide deck just to remind us of the fact that ACAG chapter of Northern New England is our host. We appreciate Jill Bowen and Mark Monica for the work that they have done to bring this to a far-reaching audience. We have attendees on this discussion from Northern New England, the host chapter, of course, all the way across the country to Southern California, from Southern Florida to the Southeast and Texas in the South Central parts of the United States, and then all the way north to Alaska, and attendees far west in Hawaii. So we're very excited to have everyone from coast to coast and beyond. This is not mentoring and coaching. This is mentoring and coaching. And this, and this, and this. What we want to do in the next hour and a half is talk about lessons that our panelists have developed over the years as they have helped prepare the next generation of healthcare executives. And I suspect many of you have done the same. But this will be a great opportunity to hear about new ways of doing business, different ways of doing business as we proceed. This is our agenda for today. We'll have some opening comments from each of our panelists. We have some questions that I will ask of them, and then we certainly appreciate questions from the audience as we go along. We'll close up initial comments at 5:25, and as Tia has told us, we've got to be present for duty all the way until the closing time at 5:30 p.m. this afternoon, or wherever you happen to be out in Alaska and Hawaii. Steve Leffler, physician out at the Vermont Medical Center, Tom Manion at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, and Marie Vienneau at Northern Light. Also on the slide decks, which you can regain control of on the chat box that Mark sent out, there's a link for these slide decks, which will show these session materials and these additional resources. What I'd like to do is, at this point, close the slide, stop sharing, and I will ask for Steve to open our comments, and then Tom and Marie. Steve, please.
Thank you so much, David. So a little bit of background about me. As you heard, I'm a lifer at UVM. I've been here for my whole career. I even went to medical school here. I did leave for residency for 3 years and went to New Mexico. I came back to Vermont in 1993. And I just think it's important for everyone on this webinar to hear, I had no plans whatsoever to become the president or now ultimately the CEO of UVM Health. I was very focused on being a good doctor, teaching medical students, and ultimately working to have our department become more academic. And that was really my career path. But because of some amazing mentors in my career, which I was very fortunate to have, my career took a slightly different direction than what I envisioned as recently as 2006 or 2010 even. And so because of that, I'm passionate about mentoring people and trying to help them. And I think it's instrumental to hear where my career took a big turn, because this is important. I try and help people this when I'm mentoring the people who are coming to me right now. In 2011, I was the chair of emergency medicine at UVM. I was doing that job. I had done some other stuff, but mostly I was focused on the department and running what was going on there. And I got a call from someone named John Brumstead, who at the time was the chief medical officer for UVM. And he said, look, I'd really like you to be the med staff president next year, which I had zero desire to do. I was busy. I had stuff going on. It wasn't really something part of my career plan. It sounded like it was going to be a lot of meetings, which ER doctors don't really like. And so I sort of pushed back and said, John, you got to be kidding me. I didn't know him very well at the time. I said, I don't really want to do this. He goes, no, I think it'd be good for you. You should stretch yourself a little. My advice is say yes. And so I went home and really thought about it and thought, well, I'm going to spend my career in one spot, which it appeared at that point I might have a chance to do that. I'll take my turn. It's a service thing. I'll do it. And so I became the med staff president. And right after I became the med staff president, we had a really sticky, nasty issue with the doc. It was hard. And I was working with Dr. Brumstead every day on this complicated issue. He was the CMO. I was the leader of the medical staff, and we had to go to lawyers. It was a really, really difficult thing. But I started to really appreciate Dr. Brumstead, and we started to build a working relationship. And I started asking him a lot of questions and working through some stuff. And then as my time as the med staff president was winding down, he became the CEO of UVM Medical Center at the time. And he said, hey, I'd like you to think about being the CMO. I'd like you to apply. And I said the same thing. I said, no way. I'm an ER doc. I like what I'm doing. That's even more meetings, John. And he said, boy, I really encourage you to say yes. Stretch yourself a little. You could have an impact on more people. And that really was the turning point in my career. So really it was becoming the med staff president, saying yes to something that I wasn't really that interested in. So that's almost the biggest advice I give to people that come to me for mentoring. You have to stretch yourself. You have to take on some things that maybe you didn't think you wanted to do. You never know where that's going to lead. And the other thing that I've really found valuable is, my whole career has been in an academic teaching setting where learning from others is part of how you do things, but also teaching constantly. And so, way back when I was a medical student, so now a really long time ago, I was just starting my third year in medical school, and I was on rounds. And the chief resident at the time said to the medical students, your job is always to think about what you would do in this situation. Have an idea in your head before I say what we're going to do. And I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask you guys to tell us because I want you to try and plan forward. So each year you move up, what would you do? Which was unbelievably good advice because when you're an acting intern, you thought about what the interns did. When your interns thought what the residents did. When your residents thought about the attendings did. It gave you a good chance to practice some decision making. And if you didn't agree with what they were going to do, you could ask them why. It made you do that in your head. So that's another piece of advice I give to all my mentees. Hey, what would you do in this situation? In fact, I was just with one of my mentees yesterday, and there's a big thing going on at the hospital right now. And I said to them, hey, imagine you're in my seat. What would you do? And they said, well, you must have the right answer. I'm like, well, look, let's be clear. Decisions that get to me, there is no right answer. There's two bad ones. Hopefully, one's a little less bad. All the easy ones that had a right answer have already been done before it gets here. So now we have two bad ones. Tell me which one you'd pick and why. And how are you going to minimize the damage if you're wrong? And how are you going to, where are you going to get more advice? And so I like to push my mentees to put themselves as if they had to make the decision. It really helps. So, um, a couple key things. If you're lucky enough to have a mentor, that's great. And everyone on this call, your job is to make sure you are training the next generation and figuring out how you're going to pass that on. I push all of you to say yes to something that you don't want to do in the next little while, but also invite your mentees to stretch, to do something bigger. That's really how I ended up being now the CEO of UVM Health, is I kept saying yes. And if you say yes enough times, then you get big things can happen, big opportunities. So I'm going to basically tell you a couple last things that I firmly believe that one of your biggest jobs as leaders is to mentor the next generation who comes behind you, to get them ready to step forward. To do that work, you have to take time out of your busy day. All of you on here have 1,000 things that are important parts of your time. You have to build time to mentor people. It has to be real time. They have to have time on your schedule. Yes, mentoring can happen in the hallway. It can happen in a clinical encounter in a room. But the really meaningful mentoring happens when you have people that trust you and come to you. And I was very fortunate Dr. Brumstead, even now, still makes time for me to call him and run stuff by him and get his thoughts on stuff. So real mentoring requires patience, curiosity, time, but most importantly, commitment. It really takes a commitment to have people and to figure out ways you can bring them to stuff with you, have debriefing time. And so I've been trying to do that. I make time to bring up and coming leaders to some operational leader meetings, some leader meetings. And then after the meeting, make sure I have some time so I can hear their issues. Um, I'm going to stop there and pass it on, but I will tell you that a lot of the best mentoring I got, I can't exactly remember the exact advice I got, but I can remember how it made me feel. It made me feel like I was valuable. It made me feel like I could do it. And it made me feel like I had what I needed. So oftentimes, just making the time to listen to somebody and give some advice, even if they don't take the advice or they don't remember the advice, they will remember that you were there for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Your story about Dr. Brumstead reminds me of a conversation I had with my chief of surgery when I was the commanding officer, or the CEO, if you will, of Landstuhl Medical Center in Europe, in Germany, the military's medical center, only medical center overseas. And I was having my closeout evaluation with the chief surgeon and chief of surgery. And I said, you're really pretty good at this. You should try to take your skills to the next level and consider being the deputy commander of clinical services, CMO of a hospital. He said, nope, I'm going to be cutting on patients for the rest of my life. That's all I want to do. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time. I said, well, think about it. You're really good at this and you've got a unique skill, and I think you should try it. When he left the hospital, he did have a CMO job, and he ended up as a three-star general in charge of all military medicine for the United States military. And when I last saw him at his retirement ceremony, I said, "When was the last time you cut on a patient?" And he was not happy with me. He said, "It's been way too long and it's your fault." So those conversations that we have either as mentors or as mentees are very, very important. I noticed that our other panelists, Tom and Marie, nodded when you said when a decision comes to you, there are really only two decisions and they're both bad. So let's pop over to one of them. Tom, let's have some time from you, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Remind me never to follow Steve Leffler on a panel. He's a wonderful wealth of experience, and clearly, yeah, I identified with so much of what Steve said. Just a quick expanding a little bit more on my background briefly. I started my career in clinical trials at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. I found my way upstate to upstate New York at Bassett Healthcare in Cooperstown, and then began to move eastward toward Vermont. And actually, as mentioned, worked at Porter Medical Center. Hi, Linda, and a few people on the call I see, and of course, had the opportunity to work with Steve and many of the wonderful people in UVM Health, and really appreciate their partnership and support along the way. Early in my career, and I would say especially so when what drove me toward picking Sloan Kettering as the first place to start my career was the development and the values that they had as an organization to really help you grow and to try things and encouraging you to look at different career options and pathways. And I actually continue to use what that organization talked about as one of the top career oriented organizations for launching your career in healthcare going forward, and was able to find like-minded institutions as I move forward. And my first vice president job, I think I was probably 30, working at Porter Medical Center, and had a wonderful and charismatic leader, Fred Niffen, who is just an absolute character in a stitch, and just someone who to this day, whenever I make a pilgrimage back to Vermont, typically to the Basin Harbor Club in Virgins with my family, I always try to get a hold of Fred. But I will tell you all with mentorship and people who take that time to invest in you, it's bi-directional, right? It's like any relationship that you have. You only get out of it what you put into it. And ACHE does have a mentorship contract, and you can use that for however you want to. But there are some really good things about how you're committing to the relationship, how you're going to drive the work you're going to co-produce with one another. And I'll just say, on the other side of that coin, being a mentor, I get so much out of. For me, it's what fills my cup. It's the best part of the work I get to do, and to work with people who are driven, who are interested in growing. I wish I had more time. Steve is absolutely right. You have to budget for it. You have to find the place for it on your calendar, because you can get swept away in the organizational current that will drag you down the beach somewhere else. And if you don't budget for that time, it's just not going to happen. So as each of you grows in your careers, it's a critically important piece of work. And then I think as you go through this, I think there are other ACHE programs where you can talk about this, but mentors, and then there are also sponsors, people who will take their own political cash and bring it to the tables that you are not at, because they spent that time with you, developing you, helping you grow, and will speak on your behalf at those tables when there are opportunities that could help you stretch and help you grow, and to say, who the right person is for this challenging opportunity. Insert the name here, because you've earned that respect. You've earned that you've shown that you're interested in that growth, and you deserve that opportunity. Um, I will say for me, I also have a kind of constellation of peer mentors. I think at a certain level, people who are, when I first started at New London Hospital, which was March 9th of 2020. For those of you who remember March of 2020, it was a really bad time to start a job. My first ever CEO job, I think then I was 36. I thought I was just turning on Epic. That's hard enough, right? And 3 days later, the WHO declares COVID-19 a pandemic. Masks go on. imposter syndrome enters into every cell of your being, and you start to question yourself. Um, that was one of the best times for me to pick up the phone and talk to a couple of my key mentors who were helped me remember that I was there for a reason. I needed to ensure I believed in myself. And like all things, this too shall pass. Although it felt like forever, right? It still feels like a fever dream today that all happened and here we are. But it was that mentorship, those relationships, that rapport that I built with the people who could help me and knew me better than I knew myself, especially in this insecure moment, to help me persevere and see through the moment. And of course, New London Hospital has transformed as a result of a lot of the things we did there. And I won't go into all that in here, but the other side of it is that I'm now at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and continue to provide mentorship to several people throughout our system. And it is exactly the thing that makes me, it fills me up, fills my cup up the most. It brings me the most joy to be able to help other people grow, give them the help and guidance that I know I received. And it's one of the ways that you send the elevator back down to help people who are on their way up trying to do good work and to grow as leaders. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause there and turn it back over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Tom. Your comment about mentoring being bidirectional. I think that we all gather insight when we are sitting down and talking with our mentees. I think that if we're not learning as we are mentoring, then we're not doing it quite exactly the way it should be done. And your comment about peer mentors is incredibly important. We have colleagues, they may or may not be in our organization, but we have colleagues in our professional circles or our personal circles that we can bounce ideas off or ask for questions about. Taking the CEO job in March of 2020 brings back my own fears. I flew home on the 13th of March, which is the day that the country's borders were closed. I got into the country at 5 p.m. at Dallas Airport, and the borders were closed just a couple of hours after that. And the folks who came in behind me were shoulder to shoulder for hours as they went through medical screening processes. There is a fascinating book. It's an interesting book called Paragraph Three. That's the title of the book, Paragraph Three. And it's a series of interviews with CEOs, COOs of a variety of organizations about how they got through the COVID years. And it's a thin book, but your comments, Tom, caused me to think about that. We're going to jump over to Marie now and ask for her thoughts as we continue this path down coaching and mentoring. Marie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So many things resonate with me that my colleagues have said that I'll jump in and share some of my thoughts. So I, like Steve, had no plans to be a leader when I became a registered nurse in 1988, and went to the some of you may remember, there was a thing called the Deaconess Nursing School in Boston. And that no longer exists. In fact, the Beth Israel Deaconess was not a thing then. It was just the Deaconess Hospital. So I was a nurse and I was excited to be a nurse, and I was going to become a CRNA. That was my career plan when I left nursing school. But I'm from a tiny town in Maine, a town called Millinocket. And I decided to go back to my hometown to work in their small hospital. And I was a staff nurse. I started there in 1990, and I worked in the special care unit. And so the talking about saying yes when asked to do something, it all started for me when we had a bad Joint Commission survey in our special care unit that I was a nurse in, and the leaders, the CNO and the chief operating officer, came to me and said, would you go to a course in Baltimore, I think it was, and study to be the Joint Commission standards and get the special care unit back to its Joint Commission accreditation. And I'm like, sure, I guess I can do that. And so off I went to my course, and I learned all about special care unit standards for Joint Commission and came back and, got the unit up to snuff, and we passed the survey. And so after that, they, not even knowing or being my formal mentors, became my mentors. And within a few short years after that, I became the chief nursing officer and, worked at that organization for several years. But I was only 26 when I became the chief nursing officer. And so by 2002, I had become the CEO of that rural hospital. And I'm proud to say that those two mentors that I had were women in leadership, and I was the first CEO of that. I was the first female CEO of that hospital, as well as the next hospital that I took on. So, for my women colleagues out there that are interested in women in leadership, I was very proud of that accomplishment. But it just shows that your mentors don't have to be formal to be mentors. They weren't assigned to me. They just took an interest in my growth and my leadership, and helped me to achieve a career goal. So since then, I have my COVID story is, Tom, I had to lead my organization, then Mayo Regional Hospital in Dover, Foxcroft, Maine, through a merger with Eastern Maine Healthcare Systems, which is now Northern Light Health. And it took about 5 years to get that done. And the merger took place on March 1st of 2020. And I, that day, took on a second critical access hospital as their CEO. And of course, March 13th, we know what happened. So it was a very challenging time to lead, as well as to bring, being a mentor is really about growing your organization, right? So it's our responsibility to help people to grow, and you need new leaders. You need to be bringing the next generation of leaders forward. So it's always been very important to me to understand the goals of the people that I work around, those that come to me, those that want support, and to help them to identify a path to achieving those goals. And that's often what a mentor can do. I've had the privilege of actually having my organizations invest in formal coaching for me. So I've, as recently as last year, had a formal coach. So it's a lifelong venture in leadership to continue your growth and development. I mean, ACHE is always about lifelong learning, but it's a lifelong venture to continue your own growth and development, and also bringing others along with you and helping them to grow. And it improves them, it improves their careers, it also improves your organization and the future of your organization by bringing this talent and helping them to see what their goals are and bringing them up, lifting them up in your organization to future leadership roles. So I've been very grateful throughout my career for what ACHE has pushed me to do, but also what my mentors have pushed me to do. And it's also been extremely rewarding to mentor many, many colleagues and people throughout my career. So I guess that would be my story, and I'll turn it back to David.
Thank you, Marie. That's wonderful. This idea of continuing to grow throughout your career as a lifelong or a career-long responsibility, both on the part of the mentee and the part of the mentor or mentors for that mentee is an important thought, because just as our professional society pushes us to maintain our technical knowledge, our professional knowledge throughout our career, we also have a need, each of one of us, to maintain and continue growing in our personal skill sets by talking with those, working with those around us, mentors that we have to ensure that we're continuing to grow. What I'd like to do is ask the panelists some questions, And I'd like to introduce each question with a poll that Tia will put up on the screen for us one at a time. So the first poll uh, will ask us, what's the most unexpected way you've connected with a mentee? And we've got a couple of options here for you to pick from. And we'd like to ask you to sign in now, not sign in, but to respond to this poll.
We'll give you about 30 seconds here. Thank you to all who are clicking on that poll. Choose the option that is closest to your experience. We'll give you about 15 more seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Well, good. You can see the responses there on your screen. For the four of you who don't have a mentor, our goal is to give you some thoughts today. For those of you who have mentors or are mentors yourselves, you can see the different ways in which we've first started those variety of opportunities to help the next generation grow. So I'm going to start with Steve and then bounce over to Tom and then Marie. Steve, what's the most unexpected way you've connected with a mentee?
So this is one of my big lessons for everyone that's in this webinar. So when I became president of UVM Medical Center, we were interviewing for some leadership positions, some director positions, a couple of VP positions, and we had some external candidates, and we had oftentimes a number of internal candidates. And as you look through a list of internal candidates, some of them were clearly qualified and was going to be a great interview, but some of them it felt like it was going to be a big jump for them. But I made a decision that I was going to interview, or I was going to have a meeting with every single person internally who applied. Some of them, we'd already told them, you don't qualify for the job. But I thought to myself, boy, if they're, doing this stretch and really trying to grow their career, I want to hear from them and hear why they applied and know more about them. So I was doing that. I was usually 3 or 4 people each time for these different positions. And about 2 years ago now, we were having a real crisis in an area of the hospital that we were really having trouble getting under control, and it didn't have good leadership. We were trying to figure out what to do, and we were interviewing for a VP position, and a mid-career person had applied who was not qualified for this VP position. But I met with them. They had a military background. They were a pharmacist, and when I was sitting there talking to this person, I thought, oh my gosh, this person might be able to solve our leadership problem in this area. And I asked him a bunch of questions about it. I asked him if he was interested in doing why he applied for this big role, what he was looking for. And by the end of the meeting, I said, hey, I'm going to run something by you and see what you think. And this was totally out of everything he had done before, but I knew he had good leadership experience from the military, and he was a detail person, and he had accomplished some very impressive things on his CV in the military. And so um, we gave him this other job, not the VP job that he'd applied for. About a year and a half ago, he totally overhauled the department, fixed it all, became the permanent position. At first, I was just giving him an interim to try and shore up the work. And he's going to go on to be an even bigger leader now and other stuff. And so my advice is if you have internal people applying for roles, even if they don't look like they qualify for the role, we've decided now, we tell them you're not going to get the VP position. You don't have, but Dr. Leffler is still going to interview you. And we have a nice half-hour to 45-minute interview. And 2 or 3 times now, those people have come back later to take on bigger roles. I just told you my most successful one, but really works well. And people love to have that FaceTime with the president or CEO, tell you about themselves. And so I think it's a very good use of time. You see who are the people in your department, in your wherever you're working, that have passion, that want to grow, that want to do bigger stuff. So make time for those interviews. Thank you.
That's great. And you may never see that person again as they walk their part of the hospital hallways, the medical center hallways, and you walk yours. But for that 30 to 45 minutes, you had a mentoring opportunity. And I was out in the field on a field training exercise, and there was a knock at my tent, and this young captain came in, and he said, "I've got some questions I'd like to ask you." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I carry." He was the aide de camp for a one-star general. He said, "I have some career questions, and my general is a medical corps officer. He's a doc." He says, "I don't know the first thing about administration. Go talk to Rubenstein." And he came and talked to me. We had about a 90-minute conversation. And I didn't see him again for years and years and years. But he has gone through his career, a wonderful healthcare administration career. I don't know if it had anything to do with that 90-minute conversation, but like your conversations, it may only last for 30 or 45 minutes once, and that's it. But for those minutes, you're mentoring. So great. Tom, what's the most unusual way you have received a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say how I became a mentor in a most unusual way was through a LinkedIn cold, message. And I get so many of these things that are like salesy, but this one was from someone who was in a graduate program at Cornell, was finishing up, and basically just sent me this really vulnerable, honest. I really want to learn, and like looked at your career, followed you, would love to just get some thoughts. And it actually turned into, it wasn't long term, but it was probably, a 2 to 3 month stint of setting up a few different calls and helping out where I could, and just he was finishing his program, trying to think through what kinds of roles would set him up for the best next step, and where he wanted to go, and kind of emulate someone who's followed my path. And I think, just to go back to the comments that were made earlier, there is no one path, right? Like everyone's path in healthcare is this kind of squiggly line that like kind of end up where they end up. And ultimately he chose a consulting track, and he's doing fantastic. But it was a very as early of a career that you can think of, reached out and said, before I make a commitment here about direction, can I just ask you some questions about what makes sense, and what would you advise? If you could do it all over again, what kind of things would you do? And it was so fun. It was just great to just talk to someone who was interested in hearing my story. I mean, I think that one of the I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the call, but I'll speak for myself. One of the best ways to get my attention is to ask me questions about me. And this sounds very vain, but like people love to talk about themselves, right? Let me tell you about all the things that I did. And so, it was a great way to figure out what he valued, where his values aligned, what he thinks his next step is going to be. And the door is still open for him to reach back out and start another conversation. And actually later, as he began his consulting work, he sent me a note to say thank you for everything. And it was a really nice way to just help in what was really only a handful of hours of conversation over a few months. I believe if you put good out into the world, it will come back to you in many different ways.
Thank you, Tom. There's a very, very important lesson in what you just talked about, and that is how do you approach a potential mentor? I have given counsel over the years. It's not to shake a hand and say, "Would you be my mentor?" Rather, it's to shake a hand and say, or knock on a door, or ask for a short visit, a 15-minute office call, and to lead with the question, I have some career questions. May we talk about that for a few minutes? Um, I think that is much more disarming to senior leaders who have a lot of people who want to shake a hand and say, "Would you be my mentor?" And so, in your story, I think that we can pull out that particular lesson. Um, could I ask you some career questions as opposed to, "Would you please be my mentor?" So, thanks for that input. Marie, we'll come to you.
Same question, the most unusual way.
Yes, the most unusual way you've received a mentee.
So mine would be that I was asked by a colleague, who you've mentioned, Jill Bowen, she has a consulting group, and she actually is also in my ACHE chapter, and asked me to talk to someone that she was working with that was having some career confidence issues, and I did not know this person. The person was states away, but her goal was to become a CEO. And so I accepted Jill's invitation, and I have not met this person in person, but I worked with her over several months via Teams and Zoom, and just talked with her, found out what her challenges were, but answered her questions and tried to support her through some of the challenges she was having in seeking the role that she wanted. And so I hope it was successful. I do know that I checked in just recently, and she did get her CEO job, and is working on that now. So I need to follow up with her. And she is also in the process of trying to combine 2 hospitals and 2 hospital boards, which I have done. So I'm going to hopefully be able to support her again in that. But that was really an interesting invitation from Jill, and really I was really pleased to be able to help this person from states away, even though I didn't know her in a professional capacity. So it was very rewarding.
That's neat. As with any question that comes our way in our professional careers, we may not have the answer, but most of us have the opportunity to help find the answer. And this is an example where Jill didn't have the answer, but found a way to get the answer, and that was to invite you in. And thanks for what you've done to say yes to that young careerist. We're going to stick with you, Marie, but first I'm going to ask Tia to prepare to put the second question up on the screen, and that is, what helps you make the most of your professional relationships? And we'll have Tia put that up with some options for you to answer.
The question is on your screen. We'll take about 30 seconds here. Thank you to everyone that is participating. We see you and we appreciate you. We'll take 15 more seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Thank you, Tia. For all of our participants, not just attendees, but participants. You can leave that on the screen for as long as you'd like. And we'll start with Marie. And Marie, I'd like to ask you, what helps you make the most out of your professional relationships?
Well, I, like the majority of the group, answered that question and said authentic personal connection. And so I think that has been, that definitely being, definitely working closely with people, being authentic, being transparent, and getting to know them personally really helps you to grow professionally. I have always tried to stay involved in my profession. ACHE has been a big part of that. I became an FACHE in I think about 2005. Has been very active in my chapter. It was this chapter, the Northern New England chapter, that I was the president of, and was involved in their leadership for about 10 years. And have very much carried on those. Once you meet somebody and you get to know them in your profession, whether they work with you in your organization, they're in your chapter, you're on a board with them, you have them as a colleague forever, right? They're not just a person that you clicked on LinkedIn. They're somebody that you can pick up a phone and call. You can pick up, you can ask their advice. And on many occasions, I have professional relationships where I've brought them to work with me. They've come to join one of my organizations. Just recently, I've been in this role at Northern Light Mercy Hospital for only 2 months, and a colleague of mine who was was the education chair of the Northern New England Board is coming to join my organization as one of our VPs. I've never worked with him before, but he's joining my organization. So it's just those relationships can be so valuable over time and really bring a lot to your career and their career. But it all comes down to authentic and genuine personal relationships.
Great. Thank you very much. Steve, how would you answer that?
I was with the majority. I'm a firm believer that authentic personal connection makes all the difference. So obviously, Vermont is a very small state. Tom knows this. Every person in Vermont knows every other person, and everyone's connected somehow. And so you can be in a really tough negotiation with someone or some issue, and you're going to see them later in the supermarket, on the soccer field where your kids play, at a party. I sat next to them in a restaurant, like I was in a hot meeting, and then 2 hours later, I was in a restaurant, and they were the next table over. So that is just the nature of Vermont. But I actually think that really helps because when you know people beyond just the one issue you're facing today, and you build up a relationship over time and it's authentic and real, and they realize that you're going to be a straight shooter, you can get a lot done. And so once again, when you're whether you're either the mentor or the mentee, when people see you lead with integrity, see you lead not only for the situation you're dealing with now, but knowing there's going to be future ones coming, it impacts how you do it. A scorched earth, any scorched earth strategy in Vermont is always going to come back to haunt you every time, right? Because you're going to have to deal with that person for something else. It's assured, and they might either work for you in the future or you might work for them. That's how small the state is. So I work very, very hard to be respectful and work on all situations to get to the best result we can, even if we don't always agree. And that's part of what I try and pass on to that's how I expect my teams to behave. And when mentees ask questions, like they'll say, Steve, you're totally in the right on this. Why don't you just, really let them have it? I'm like, no, that's not going to work because even if we win this one, we're going to lose the next one or the bigger one. We need them to be a partner with us. So um, I think being authentic and personable is critical to leadership and to how we work together.
Thank you very much. Tom, to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great stuff has been mentioned, and I mean, I think we have a choice always in terms of our interactions, and eventually we will have conflict and things that go great and things that don't. It's inevitable. I think we also have to make sure that we focus on. It kind of relates to a bit of what Steve said about we refer to it as staying above the line, right? You can easily dip below the line. You can go and tell someone else in another room about can you believe that Leffler did this thing? Like what a whatever. And you know what? Like that reflects in your character and your credibility. And it does not help you professionally. It does not help you grow, and it does injure your relationships, long term. And I think instead of when you create your norms as a group, as a team, as you think about how you're talking about challenges, and you are eventually in a place where you're recognizing like, geez, that was I was being below the line there. Let me pull myself back up. It really does. It's helpful for all of your professional relationships in making sure that you're showing up the way that you're supposed to. Whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you don't say, whatever you don't do, all those things as leaders come back, and those actions and actions are on your scorecard one way or another. The other piece of that I would say, it's just with all relationships, and leveraging them, especially with mentors, mentees, sponsors, etc., is to really have that solid bedrock of trust, right? Approach people with good intent, assume good intent, be curious, ask questions, and again, you will all have mentors, mentees who may have had actions or things that aren't exactly in alignment with your values or the values of the organization. Be ready to have you have to have those conversations, right? You have to be vulnerable and honest with each other, and direct. But you have to spend the time to cultivate that and build that trust and talk about how we're going to communicate and work together in order to get the best possible solid relationship that you can out of that. So that's what I would add.
This idea of trust is incredibly important because the mentee is bearing his or her soul to the mentor. The mentor is giving professional advice or career advice to the mentee. and neither needs to be talking about that outside of the office or the cafe or wherever they happen to be meeting. This idea of trust in each other is critically important. Thank you for bringing that up, and Steve and Marie touched on pretty much the same thing. Let me stay with you, Tom, and ask um, question after we put up the poll number 3 about how your mentoring fits into your personal leadership framework. So, Tia, would you put up question number 3, please?
Everyone should see that poll question. How central is mentoring to your personal leadership framework? We'll give you 30 seconds here to get your responses submitted. Take about 15 more seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Okay. Once again, you can keep the results up for as long as you'd like to take a look at them. But Tom, let's start with you. How central is mentoring to your personal leadership framework?
Yeah, so I mean, mentorship fits into. I actually take kind of a talent development bent to this a little bit, where to me, mentorship is a very deliberate tool in developing future leaders of your organization. And we are using Nine Box. If you haven't heard it, I recommend go Google Nine Box. It essentially is nine boxes, an x-axis of three, a y-axis of three. X is performance, Y is potential, and it gives you a sense of where your potential is. I won't go into the details. It's a whole nother. That's another one of these sessions. But when we talk about performance, there's two kinds of performance. How I measure it, you have performance of getting stuff done, right? You meet your budget or exceed it. You get great engagement scores. You work in delivering on the strategic initiative on whatever it may be. Then there is, how do I show up as a leader? I think we all know that person who's really good at their job, who's just absolutely miserable to work with. And they get stuff done, the care might be fantastic, they may always hit their budget marks, but man, like people are miserable working with them. They have low engagement scores, they have other things along those lines. And sometimes it's because they don't necessarily have someone showing them the mirror, and looking in it the right way. Sometimes it's that's just who they are, and we have to set people free into the wild whose values don't align with your own and the organizations and the direction you're taking them. But I think it's important as you think about what kind of culture are you trying to set as a leadership team? What kind of things matter to you? When you think about your values as an organization and how people live those values in their work, those values, those behaviors, those are the things that really build up to the culture that you're trying to define. And if you're not promoting people into leadership roles who embody that live that are above that line, like I was saying every day, you're going to have leaders who have a lot of that negativity or have values that are going to be damaging to the direction that you're trying to take your organization. I think taking the time to tailor that kind of approach and see, we talk about that inverted L, so that kind of in that nine box, the people who are in those top like three boxes there, those are the people you invest in. Those are the people you say, we're going to expose you to complex, challenging initiatives and give you some spotlight to shine to show us all how awesome you are. Maybe we're going to talk about how we move you into a different part of the organization that is struggling and see how you can help with moving this along. But we're mentoring you along the way. We're giving you the tools. We're coaching you. We're giving you the feedback around vulnerability and behaviors and how you're mentoring others along the way. And again, if you're not, we're giving you that direct feedback about what needs to change. And as you move people through, mentorship moves people through that nine box in a way where it honors not just people's achievements, but actually how they achieved, right? What was that achievement and how did they get there? And that kind of pipeline is that most effective way of creating what you want to embody in your leadership team as a whole.
Great. Thank you. Steve, we know you have to leave here for another meeting. Do you have some thoughts before you head out?
I do. Thank you. So I actually think that for leaders, mentoring needs to be essential. And here's why I say that. Because as you begin being a leader, the team that works with you and for you is your success. You can only do so much. You can be the best leader in the world. If you do not have a good team, you're going to fail. And so that investment you make in helping people to understand what you're trying to do and why, them feeling like they're valuable, that makes your job easier and better. I can tell you that as the CEO, a big part of my goal is to make it so that when I'm not in this role, they do not need me. And so that you have to be mentoring for that. You have to have people that are coming up through the ranks, whether you use Nine Box or some other tool. I like Nine Box a lot, but I can tell you I found a couple great leaders that weren't even in the Nine Boxes. So I think that's part of it. But there's other stars out there. You have to kind of look for them. So if you believe that your goal is to have the best team, the better your team, the easier your job is. Okay. So mentoring that team is going to make your job a little easier. And if you think as a leader, you should be able to have yourself be eliminated and everything could go on fine, that means a key part of your work is mentoring. So I'm sorry I have to leave you for the last half hour. I have to run to a meeting on a big issue. I apologize. I have to cut out early. I love this conversation and thank you all for your participation, for being leaders and mentors. Have a great night.
Thank you for your participation, Steve. It's been invaluable. We appreciate it.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Marie, we'll come to you.
Remind me the question again,
Oh,
David.
sorry, certainly. How central is mentoring to your personal leadership framework? How do you use it as part of your leadership style?
I check the box that it's essential to my leadership style, and for the reasons that that Steve just said just before he left, in that you have to always be developing your team and the leaders around you, and that does you need them. You want it to be your goal that they are functioning without you there, and that they're advancing themselves. So I haven't used Nine Box, but used multiple different tools throughout the years in evaluating leaders and team building with leaders. But I feel like I'm always mentoring those that are around me, particularly my direct leadership team, so that we can be strong and making our organization better. And of course, all of them are then moving on to mentor other leaders. So it seems like it's a continuous process and a continuous cycle of educating, mentoring, and lifting up other leaders in your organization. It's essential to the success of your organization to be able to do that. So I think it's essential to leadership to be successful.
Marie, do you intentionally train the next level of your leaders to be mentors so that,
We
or is it just by learning by having been done?
I have not I have not had a formal training program in one of my organizations. My health system has made attempts at having formal, we do have a lot of leadership training and leadership development, but not necessarily mentorship. ACHE does a great job of that, as you know, David. They have some formal training programs in how to be a mentor,
Mhm.
and I have participated in one of those. But I haven't had a formal program. We do have some affinity groups and things of that nature that people can start the process of learning to be mentors in, but I really would like to have it be more of a formal process in my organization.
Thank you very much. Let me ask both of you this next question, and I'll ask it of you after Tia puts up the survey question. How do you or your organization measure mentorship success? Thank you, Tia.
You are welcome. Everyone, you should see your poll question on the screen. We'll take 30 seconds here before we close it out. Fifteen seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You should see the results on your screen.
Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in that question. I will be the first to answer the question about how do we measure mentorship success. I have, during my 35 years in the Army, never once had a formal program to measure success. We talked a lot about what we call footlocker counseling, sitting down, identifying the soldiers that we want to work with in particular as mentees. But as far as a formal program to actually measure that, that's not something I ever came across during my time. So I'd be curious, Marie, first with you, do you have a process to either organizationally or personally measure success?
I personally, I'd like to measure success by seeing the mentees achieve their goals of advancement, or and sometimes you asked to be mentored because you have a particular career goal in mind that you're trying to achieve. So I really like that measure, but it's
Don't
difficult.
tempt me.
Somebody has a hot microphone.
Yes. But it's difficult to do that, to actually collect that data. But my system has attempted to do that and has had key performance metrics over several years where we were measuring the advancement of our employees to the next level. So it didn't even have to be that you were getting advanced into leadership, but we were measuring the advancement of our employees to their next career step. And so for several years we did measure that, and it was a useful tool, but it didn't necessarily directly tell you about the benefits of mentorship because we didn't have necessarily that information. But I think all of the using the retention scores and the engagement scores is also a good indicator of successful mentor programs, because retention and engagement and satisfaction are directly related to culture, and people tend to work in a place where they feel aligned with the culture and they feel supported by the culture. So I do think that those are strong measures of successful development and mentorship.
Thank you, Marie. And Tom?
So I agree with Marie that engagement scores are a way to look at how well they're doing. I also think that's an imperfect tool as well. You can look at the leadership index, how those employees relate to that leader. But I think context is really important because there are definitely scenarios where people are put in certain roles where you have to look at the historical, how did we get to this point? If it's a new leader in that group, and there may be lower scores or lower engagement. There could be other reasons why, and I think it's worth it. It's a metric, but it's not the metric. I would say, the 9 box work we talked about, but I think to me, I take a bit of a longer view of this. I look at the mentees that come through, and we can say that we've had success with our programs when those mentees themselves go on to be mentors, right? They have become leaders in their own right, and that your mentors are successful at creating new leaders that are going out and again embodying the values, the behaviors that you culturally are looking to establish, grow, or retain within your organization. I think if you're doing that and those values are being clearly observed in all aspects of your work, then you've created a successful program that you should be proud of. And again, nothing's black and white. There are so many different shades of gray you have to look at here, and context is important. But as you come close enough to these programs, you can look at some of those data points and ask yourselves, are we seeing the return on the investment? And I think in many ways, it's you can quickly say yes when you can see the next generation, which again is that longer view. How has that next generation grown your new leaders for your organization?
Yeah. I agree with both of you. I started the answering by saying I've not been in an organization that had a formal metric program, but my personal way of measuring is just seeing where the men and women who I have worked with over the years end up down the road and what they have become, whether they listened to my counsel or didn't listen to my counsel, but because I'm sure they received counsel from other people along the way. And it's just a good feeling in your soul when you see a mentee, whether it's a short time or a long relationship, excel in their careers, and you know that you had a piece and a part of that. Not only a good feeling for yourself, for their success, but by virtue of what you might have done, a good feeling for the organization they're in and the people that they are now mentoring. So thank you to both of them. Um, I'll ask one more question, and then I'm going to ask if the audience, the participants, and we choose the word participants intentionally as opposed to just audience members. The potential participants have questions either by raising a hand on the Zoom reactions button or by typing in a question into the chat box. And the question is for both of you, um, what is your criteria for saying yes to someone who would like to be mentored by you? Whether they knock on the door and say, "Would you be my mentor?" or they knock on the door and say, "Could I ask you some career questions?" Do you have any particular criteria that you think about to say yes to that individual or to find someone else to be the go-to person, the mentor? Either one of you.
Go ahead, Tom, if you want.
So I'll go ahead and start. So
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't agree to a mentorship relationship until I have that first conversation. And we need to talk through, like, tell me what it is you're looking for, right? Because what they might need is not a mentorship relationship. What they might need is, something closer to another introduction, someone else that can actually be a better mentor or serve a different kind of purpose for them, whatever that situation may be. So I think first of all is to get into what does this look like, and then if we're going to formally call it, asking the question, are we going to call this ongoing meeting cadence, a mentorship mentee relationship, and really to have a clear conversation about what this is and what this isn't. At that point, we talk about you're going to drive the agenda. Here are the things that I expect when we get together, and it's much warmer than this, but it's these are the points I make sure we hit. And if we can agree to those things, that those are criteria that I have in terms of where my bar is set to begin that kind of relationship. It needs to be meaningful for both of us, and um, I think I can derive meaning usually, but I need to make sure I'm adding value. And I think actually it's funny to say that. If I'm not going to be able to add value to what it is they're looking for, I'm not going to begin that meant, or I don't think if I don't think I'm going to be able to add value to whatever their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, what career decisions they're trying to make, or challenges that they have, then it doesn't make sense for us to begin a relationship. If they're on board with meeting the commitments and driving the agenda and having those conversations in the way that I expect them to, they have to show up and reciprocate and make sure that they honor that expectation. But that's, not a direct way of answering your question, David, because I think I typically say yes way too much. I'll be honest, and I end up taking on more than I can chew. And there are times where I have said, no, I actually cannot be your mentor, even though I feel like I'd be a really good fit for you, just because right now I don't have the bandwidth. And part of that, again, back to the engagement of a relationship, some of it is intense. You have it at a more frequent, interval for whatever the needs are. And then sometimes it gets throttled back to we'll check in, once a quarter, once, whatever the cadence is. But that's in some way they never really end. And so it is one of those things where you have to be clear about what is the commitment, what's the time, and if we're both going to be invested in this, then we have to have a clear understanding of what that means.
I in the same camp that you are, and I have the same problem you do as far as being too rapid to say yes. Marie, do you have specific criteria you look at when someone knocks on the door?
Yeah, so somewhat. I agree that, the initial conversation is key to, you want them to be curious, you want them to be open to feedback and, you know that they're going to be willing to act on your guidance, what you're talking to them about. I want them to be clear about what they're at, be able to tell me clearly why they're seeking mentorship and why they think that it would be a good fit that I be their mentor as part of that conversation. But chemistry matters. Mentorship works best, I feel, when there's mutual trust and respect. So between the mentor and the mentee, so you sort of need to develop that baseline of the relationship. Definitely want the mentee to be looking for someone, not just someone senior to them, but someone that's a good fit for them, someone they admire their leadership, their experience, not just because you're the senior person. So try to get that out of the initial conversation so that you know what they're looking for and whether or not I would be the best fit for them. And it is hard to say no when someone asks you to work with them. And I would say, Tom, I'm probably with you. I don't say no a lot, but it does require the time commitment on their part and on our part. And sometimes as leaders, we just, we do definitely have to make sure that we can provide the time to the mentee and really make sure that it's a valuable experience for them. So sometimes you do have to say no because you just can't make that time commitment. But it's definitely worth it when you're able to. It's usually a very rewarding experience.
Thank you both. Jennifer Cord, you had your hand up for just a moment. Did you have a question? I noticed that you also commented as Tom was talking.
No, I was doing a thumbs up and did a hands up,
Okay.
but I wanted to make sure that I put my comment in there. So it's so true. It's making
Great.
sure we
Just
align. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer. One of the worst parts of a mentoring relationship is when the mentee tries to ride the coattails of the mentor, thinking that doing so will get the mentee into a position, into a job, into a project or some such, because they're riding the coattails. What I'd ask our panelists is, on the other end of that spectrum, how do you make the most, or how do you have you experienced your mentees making the most of this professional relationship? Marie?
I think that how have I watched mentees make the most of the professional relationship? I think when they have remained committed to their goals and they have, continued to strive for their career goals and followed guidance and advice about, next steps, what is the next best role for them, and actually, see them become successful and get, what they came to you and said, my goal is to be a director. My goal is to, get this next role. To see them be successful, I think is the best reward for having worked with them, I think is how I would answer that.
Okay. Tom?
I agree, Marie. I would also add, it's the time that you debrief after some sort of event, right? Like, hey, I really need to talk to you about this conflict resolution thing that I attempted and it didn't go well, or trying to manage up, and here are the things I've tried, here are the tools I used. I don't, or before, like the pre-work, like how could we, like, I think those are the places where it's really helpful to, be there when they're vulnerable and they need that help. And it's those formative moments to, you're invested in that success, right? Like I think that's when you really know that relationship is humming, is you're like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to be there. You kind of move a little bit more into a coaching moment, opposed to a mentorship moment in some of those interactions. But I do think that we, as mentors, you kind of go through all of those. You're not just a static mentor always. You move into a coach at moments, and sometimes if you're in the organization, or even if you just have network connections that you can help with, you move into that sponsor role too. And so I think it's those kind of moments where you kind of, again, I go back to my comment, you put good out into the world, there's good that comes back to you. And I think you see those moments as opportunities for you to celebrate with them in their success and their victories.
Great. I'm going to bring in two guest panelists. who don't know that they're guest panelists until I announce them as guest panelists. And what I'd like to do is introduce our participants to Kevin Forrest, who is in the VA system, and to Alan Jones, who is in academia. He's director of a MHA program down in San Antonio. And what I would ask each of you is first, Kevin, um, in large measure, many of your leaders are former military healthcare executives. And they've taken off the uniform and put on a business suit. Um, and so, as far as mentoring them in this new career, the profession is the same as far as healthcare uh, administration or being a healthcare executive, whether they're a doc or a nurse or a pure administrator. Have you seen the VA, either in your own medical center or elsewhere, try to enculturate these and serve as mentors for these the transitioning folks?
Well, sir, awesome to see you. I know it's been a few years here, so it's great. First up, I think I would be speaking to those folks that as you're transitioning, ACHE's transitioning from military to civilian healthcare is a must do if you haven't participated in that session for starters. But I see a number of military staff, probably 30% in the VA, that have come from a military background. And I think it's, working with folks, really the art of negotiation. It's not about giving orders. If you were kind of brought up that way, that's not going to work very well. And so, I think it's coming back to that true authenticity piece that everybody brings up, and being a servant leader is really important. And, I've seen just folks do wonderful things in the VA during actually some pretty challenging times over the last year, and I've seen them flourish and do well. And so I think a lot of that also is finding that mentor real quick too, and just to get a good understanding of the VA side of healthcare and how it differentiates from the military side. But it's a great career transition for folks that still want to serve soldiers and families.
Great. Kevin, thank you. Alan Jones, on the academic side, you and your amazing faculty are developing the next generation of early careerists. And I know during the course of their didactic education, as well as their internship or residency, field placement, you talk with them about this topic. And how do you help them understand the importance of mentoring and how to go about doing that?
Well, a lot of what we do in the program is actually do a lot of programs with professional organizations and consistently bring in guest speakers, so they understand that a part of the program is that transition from getting a job. You don't provide your transcripts to your employer and expect to get a yes or no with getting in that position, and that's important. So it really is built into the program that's how we do that. And just to understand that the networking part is really critical. But I actually have a question for the other panelist I was going to ask, if that's okay.
Go ahead, please.
One of the unique aspects I guess I was going to ask is especially Tom and Marie, following your career. Mine was fairly similar. I was pretty traditional, and when I went to an organization, and I got great mentorship, but I was younger than others. But what I've also found in academia is a lot of folks are coming over from the military or doing a career change. And so they're older, but as far as experience, they're much younger. And so, just like General Rubenstein was talking about, I push, hey, you really need to find a mentor. But oftentimes they're showing up at an organization where they're probably older than many of their immediate supervisors. They may be junior to the CEO or the COO, but trying to open that up. So I was just going to ask, you both if earlier earlier on in your career, if you had some mentoring with um, folks who were older than you but younger than you, or as far as in the in that organization.
I mean, I'll say yes to both actually, Alan. I mean, I've had people who were older than me, like actually by age too, and were also more junior than me in experience. As I mentioned, I was very fortunate in my career, and I think a lot of my fortune was taking risk and looking for opportunity when it presented itself, applying and putting myself out there to jump at things. But at 30, I was a VP. At 36, I was um, a CEO. And in those scenarios, I've had plenty of people who have way more life experience. Have done things that I have never done, seen things, been a part of different organizations and industries where whether it's military or the like. I'm an Army brat too, by the way, I should mention just to put that out there. But I have learned so much from people, and I am today, still today. I mean, one of our HR leaders here worked for Fortune 500 companies and has brought many of the tools that we're using today, like Ninebox, like the Oz principle, like other things, and to help us think through how we can do things differently, challenging us. It's different. We often remind each other that we're not making widgets here and there, and we have to understand that it's there's other mission-centric value here and how that translates to caring for people. But also, we're all learning, right? Every day. There are things that we learn. You can learn from every single person you come into contact with one way or another, and you have to look for it. You have to be open to it. But I think that we are rich in opportunities to be mentored by others in other ways. But you have to be willing to open yourself up to that opportunity. And yes, I had that a lot when I was early in my career.
Well, thank you. Marie?
I was just going to say, I know we're running out of time, but I come from an area that has experienced a lot of manufacturing job loss. So not military, but got to work with and experience a lot of people that were formal mill workers that went back to careers in healthcare and, watch them grow and help them grow into these new careers, and very scary for them, right? I'm sure very similar to transitioning from the military. It can be intimidating, but to see them become successful nurses, radiology techs, you name it, and grow, and then also grow into leadership positions from something they never thought they would be challenged to do, is very rewarding, and just some of my best employees were those people that had to start a second career because life dealt them a hand that they never anticipated. So great experience.
Great. Thank you very much. Our thanks to Marie. Thank you, Marie, and Tom, to you, to Steve, who had to leave early, and then to our two surprise guest panelists, Alan and Kevin. This has been a superb program. I would point out something that was mentioned earlier by Marie, that ACHE does have a mentorship program that allows you to grow as a mentor, learn how the relationship works as a mentee, and give some tools along the way. And the next to last slide of our slide deck that you all have access to, if you look at the very, very top of the chat room, gives you some resources that you can take a look at. In the meantime, thank you for what you've done, and on your participation today, I'll ask Tia to close it out for us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, David. On behalf of ACHE, our chapter leaders, our moderator, our panelists, and all of you for your participation, we just want to say thank you. Please complete the evaluation, which is open for 1 week. The direct link is in the chat box. You can also access the evaluation by visiting your My ACHE page and selecting My Online Learning from the helpful link section on the right side of the screen. From there, click on the Access My Courses link and you will be directed to our learning management system where you can complete the evaluation. In that same location, you will be able to access the recording of this session within approximately 2 business days. Everyone who attended today's event in its entirety will see their 1.5 hours of virtual interactive education credit posted to their MyACHE account within 2 weeks of this event in the My Education Credits section. That concludes our session, which is copyrighted in 2025 by the American College of Healthcare Executives. All rights reserved. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the remainder of your week.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a